They thought they could erase me with a single meeting, but what they didn't know was that silence can turn into the loudest roar. My name is Daniel Reyes. For years, I was the passionate journalist in a city that thrived on secrets and corruption. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, but I had something they feared: the truth. I wrote for a local paper, uncovering shady deals and backroom betrayals. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. And honesty was dangerous. The man who tried hardest to shut me down was Victor Hale. He wasn't just my boss, he was the editor-in-chief, the one who had hired me fresh out of college, the one who had once called me a rising star. I trusted him, admired him even. He was sharp, charismatic, and ruthless in chasing stories. But as the years went on, I noticed a change. Victor stopped chasing the truth and started protecting certain names. Politicians, business moguls, and donors suddenly became untouchable. At first, I thought it was strategy: keep the paper alive by not poking the wrong people. But then I realized it was more than that. Victor wasn't protecting the paper. He was protecting himself. And the moment I stumbled onto a scandal involving one of his friends, everything shifted. I was called into a meeting. A cold room. 3 executives at the table. Victor at the head, avoiding my eyes. My article, the one I had spent weeks piecing together, was dismissed in minutes. Baseless. Unpublishable. Dangerous to the paper. Then came the blow that shattered me: I was suspended. Not for my mistakes, but for going too far. The betrayal hit harder than anything I'd ever faced. This wasn't just about work, it was about my voice, my integrity, my very reason for existing in that newsroom. Victor, the man who had once mentored me, had silenced me with a single decision. And worst of all, I saw the smirk he tried to hide as I walked out. But something inside me refused to die that day. Rage mixed with heartbreak. Betrayal fused with clarity. I realized the paper wasn't the voice of the people anymore, it was Victor's weapon, a shield for corruption. So, as I left the newsroom for the last time, one thought echoed in my mind: if they tried to silence me, then maybe my voice was exactly what they feared most. And fear has a way of spreading. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Victor was just under pressure. Maybe the paper really couldn't afford another lawsuit. But then the small things started piling up, too many to ignore. The first warning sign came the week after my suspension. I wasn't technically fired yet, but my name disappeared from the staff page overnight. No explanation, no announcement, just erased as if I had never worked there. When I asked HR, they brushed me off with a vague, "We're reorganizing." Then came the whispers. Former colleagues, people who used to admire my work, started avoiding me in the halls. A few still sent texts, short and nervous: "Sorry about what happened." Or worse, "Don't push this any further." They knew something I didn't, and their silence was louder than words. I began noticing Victor's behavior too. Whenever I entered the building to collect my things, he wouldn't look at me. The man who once praised me for fearless truth-telling now couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he spent long hours in closed-door meetings with city officials I had tried to investigate. Coincidence? No. My gut told me something darker was happening. But the deepest cut came when I found out about the new columnist. A flashy, smooth-talking writer, one who openly bragged about having friends in high places. He took over my stories, watered them down, turned them into puff pieces that painted the very people I was investigating as heroes. It was like watching my work get twisted into propaganda. The emotional toll hit hard. Nights became sleepless, my thoughts circling endlessly. Was I paranoid? Or was I right? The paper had been my life's work, my identity. And now I was a ghost haunting the edges of the very place I helped build. Every unanswered email, every cold shoulder, every smirk from Victor chipped away at me. One evening, desperate for clarity, I went back to the newsroom to grab some old notes. The office was quiet, most of the staff gone. As I passed Victor's office, I noticed the door slightly ajar. Papers were spread across his desk, contracts, receipts, even letters with official seals. My curiosity burned, but before I could look closer, I heard footsteps. A shadow crossed the floor. Victor's voice, sharp and low, carried down the hall, "Don't worry. Reyes won't be a problem. He's already forgotten." Forgotten. The word sliced through me like a knife. I froze in place, my heart pounding. Who was he talking to? Why was my name being discussed in such a sinister tone? I slipped out before being caught, but the unease gnawed at me long after. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Victor hadn't just silenced me. He was actively burying me. And the question clawed at my chest, how far was he willing to go? The truth hit me not with a sudden explosion, but like a slow, suffocating wave that left no air to breathe. A week after overhearing Victor's conversation, I decided I couldn't live with the doubt anymore. I still had friends on the inside, quiet allies who hadn't turned completely cold. One of them, a junior editor named Leah, finally cracked under the weight of her own guilt. "Daniel," she whispered over coffee, her eyes darting around nervously, "you didn't lose your column because of bad reporting. Victor, he sold you out." The words lodged in my throat. "What do you mean, sold me out?" Leah slid a folded document across the table. It was a leaked contract, signed by Victor and the very corporate magnate I had been investigating before my suspension. A deal worth hundreds of thousands in sponsorship. In exchange? My silence. My stories buried. My reputation smeared. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. Every line, every signature confirmed the betrayal. The man I had trusted, the mentor who once called me the conscience of the newsroom, had cashed me in like a poker chip. And it didn't stop there. Leah hesitated, then added, "He told the board you fabricated sources. That's why no one will back you. They think you're a liar." The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. I wasn't just suspended, I was branded. Every award I'd earned, every late night spent chasing truth, every ounce of credibility I'd built was being demolished brick by brick. My life's work turned into rubble. I remember stumbling out of that cafe, the city buzzing around me, but everything muffled, distorted. Anger surged hot in my chest, colliding with disbelief. How could Victor, of all people, do this? He knew what journalism meant to me. He knew my work wasn't just about stories, it was about giving a voice to the voiceless. And he'd sold me, for money and power. That night, I broke. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of old notebooks and clippings, staring at the walls as if they held answers. My phone lit up with messages, friends distancing themselves, contacts cutting ties. Even my landlord left a notice about late payments. It all crashed down at once, professional ruin, financial instability, and personal isolation. I thought about quitting. About walking away, letting Victor win. For hours I sat there, paralyzed, my mind swinging between despair and fury. But then, as the clock ticked past midnight, one thought echoed louder than the rest: if Victor was capable of erasing me this easily, what would stop him from doing it to someone else? I clenched the contract Leah had given me, the evidence of betrayal, and a spark ignited deep inside my chest. The world thought I was finished. Victor thought I was buried. But I wasn't. Not yet. And he had no idea what was coming. 4 days after Leah's revelation, I drifted through life like a ghost. Sleep was a stranger, food tasteless, and the silence in my apartment pressed down like a weight. My career was gone, my name dragged through mud, and all I could hear was Victor's voice in my head calling me unreliable, a liability. But despair is a funny thing, it can drown you, or it can harden you. And for me, it took just one moment to tip the scale. I was walking past a newsstand downtown, the kind I used to frequent to check which of my pieces had made the front page. I stopped dead when I saw it, Victor's smiling face plastered across the cover of a glossy magazine. The headline read, "Victor Hale, the man who saved modern journalism." I picked it up with shaking hands, flipping through pages that credited him for groundbreaking investigations, my exposés. My blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. My words now belonged to him, twisted into a tale where I was erased. And then came the kicker, a pull quote where Victor smugly said, "Some reporters can't handle the responsibility of truth." I stepped up where others fell short. That was it. The crack in my chest sealed into steel. No more self-pity. No more silence. If he thought he could erase me, he had underestimated the one thing I had left, my voice. I went home and tore through my old files, dusting off flash drives and stacks of notes. Victor had silenced me, yes, but he hadn't destroyed the truth. I still had evidence, interviews, recordings, documents he thought were buried. He might have stolen my platform, but I still had the stories. That night, I called Leah. At first, she hesitated, scared of being exposed, but when I told her my plan, I heard a pause on the line, a pause that carried the sound of hope. "If you're serious," she whispered, "I'll help you." It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel alone. I began training myself back into form, like a fighter preparing for the final round. Mornings were for running, clearing the fog from my mind. Afternoons, I buried myself in research, piecing together the story Victor had sold out. Evenings, I reached out to sources, quietly building alliances. Every step sharpened me, rebuilt me. Slowly, despair loosened its grip, replaced by a simmering determination. I was no longer Daniel, the silenced reporter. I was Daniel, the storm waiting to break. And one night, as I pinned Victor's magazine cover to the wall above my desk, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, "You took my name, Victor. Now I'll make sure the world remembers it, and forgets yours." The decision was made. Quiet, steady, unshakable. The fight was about to begin. Revenge, I decided, would be work, methodical, patient, and surgical. If Victor had weaponized the newsroom and turned my truth into his trophy, I would weaponize proof, witnesses, and timing until there was nowhere left for him to hide. I sketched the plan on a napkin and carried it like a map, gather irrefutable evidence, recruit allies who still believed in journalism, build traps that let his arrogance expose him, and then detonate everything in a way the public couldn't ignore. Step 1, Proof. I dug back through every file I'd ever trusted to paper and hard drive. Old interview recordings, raw transcripts, unedited photos, time-stamped emails, things Victor thought he'd buried. Leah fed me copies of internal memos proving the sponsorship deal. An ex-source handed over payment receipts showing hush money routing. Malik, a freelance IT friend, recovered deleted server logs and metadata proving which drafts were altered and when. Each recovered file was another nail in the coffin of his fabricated narrative. Step 2, Allies. I needed more than evidence, I needed voices. Leah agreed to go on record about what she'd seen and heard. Priya, the independent journalist I'd once mentored, offered to run the piece if the dossier was airtight. A former trustee, disgruntled by Victor's recent maneuvering, promised to corroborate board-level conversations. Even Marcus, the junior writer Victor had promoted, texted, "I can't keep watching this. If you need a quote, I'll give it." People who had been complicit out of fear were suddenly willing to help when they saw the full, ugly picture. Step 3, The Traps. Victor loved the spotlight. He loved being the one to save the paper. I created situations where his ego would walk right into the evidence. I leaked a fake exclusive tip to him through a burner email, something juicy enough that he couldn't resist publishing a quick puff piece that would prove how he rewrites reporting for donors. I scheduled a closed-door panel with donors and trustees and quietly alerted the trustee who'd agreed to help. I arranged for a recorded call, designed to bait Victor into boasting about deals, then made sure the recordings would be verifiable. Step 4. Sequencing. There was little room for mistakes. Legal counsel first to protect sources, Priya's timing next to ensure public reach, then a coordinated release of the forensic files, the memos, and recorded testimonies. Everything synchronized so Victor couldn't spin or bury it. No single outlet, no single person, could be compromised. The story would come from many directions at once. All the while, Victor lived in oblivion. He accepted awards, smiled for cameras, and posted triumphant editorials. His confidence was my ally. Arrogance makes people predictable. I rehearsed what would happen once the first file hit inboxes: shock, denials, fragile defenses, then collapse. On the night before the strike, I sat alone in my cluttered apartment, the dossier spread like a battle plan. Leah texted a single word: ready. Priya called to confirm the headline slot. Marcus confirmed his statement. The lawyer had notarized the affidavits. My finger hovered over the final command, an encrypted send that would set dozens of dominoes falling across email servers, newsrooms, and boardrooms. Then, my phone buzzed with a new message, an unknown number. I opened it. The text read, "Don't do this alone. Meet me at the old press room. Now." I looked up at the ceiling, heart pounding. The room felt suddenly too small. Victor still believed he was untouchable. Someone else clearly didn't. The plan was ready, but whatever waited at the press room could change everything. The old press room smelled of dust and old ink, the perfect stage for a reckoning. I almost didn't recognize the voice that greeted me in the dim light. It was Marcus. He looked smaller in person, but his hands weren't shaking. "It's all queued up," he said. "We're live across 3 platforms in 5 minutes." We walked back to the newsroom together, straight into the heart of what Victor had built and what he'd tried to burn. Cameras were set. Priya stood by with the headline cleared for immediate release. Leah clutched a stack of notarized affidavits. Malik, pale and focused, had the recovered server logs on a thumb drive. The lawyer sat across from me, calm and exact, legal action ready to deploy the moment the story landed. Victor arrived on stage confident as always, primed to frame the evening as another triumphant defense of the paper's integrity. He didn't see us at first, no one did, because the newsroom was already tuned to our signal. Then the first graphic rolled, side-by-side comparisons of my original recordings and the published bylines credited to Victor. The room stilled. Victor's smile faltered. Priya's voice cut in, steady and relentless. She narrated the timeline, how sponsorship money was funneled in exchange for burying investigations, how internal memos showing the gag deal had been signed, how edits in the server traced the theft of reporting directly to Victor's account. Malik's screen projected metadata, timestamps, IPs, user IDs. Leah read testimony from colleagues who'd watched Victor rewrite stories and scrub sources. Marcus, who had once recited Victor's lines as his own, stepped forward and admitted on camera that he'd been coached to parrot false narratives. Victor tried to speak. He opened his mouth, reached for the old charisma, but every rebuttal collided with a locked file, a signed affidavit, a recorded conversation. The lawyer read the freeze notice. Bank accounts tied to the sponsorship deal were on hold pending an inquiry. The board had been notified. Legal complaints were filed. Phones buzzed in real time as trustees, donors, and partners received the same packet we'd just released. Sponsors pulled support within the hour. Advertisers issued terse statements. The flagship donor rescinded a multimillion-dollar pledge. Outside, the feeds exploded. Clips of Victor's earlier boasts, where he'd claimed stewardship of the truth, popped up juxtaposed with the forensic proof scrolling on screen. Social media became an amplified courthouse. The man who'd silenced me now watched his empire dissolve in public, piece by piece. Colleagues who'd once flattered him turned away. The board convened an emergency vote. By dusk, his suspension was unanimous. By midnight, trustees resigned. When security gently guided him from the building, his shoulders were hunched, no bluster, no smirk, only a hollow stare. He glanced at me once, as if searching for a crack to slide back through. He found none. I didn't clap. I didn't cheer. I let the evidence speak, let the law do its work, let the public record rewrite the narrative he'd stolen. Standing in the flood of camera lights and murmuring reporters, I felt something settle, first pride, then relief, then a quiet, iron clarity. They had tried to silence me. Now my voice was the one they couldn't escape. The newsroom felt different in the weeks after Victor's fall, lighter, freer, almost unrecognizable. His name vanished from mastheads, plaques, and awards. The board moved quickly, eager to distance themselves from scandal, and by the end of the month, his entire career was reduced to footnotes in articles titled "The Collapse of a Media Titan." For Victor, the consequences were swift and brutal. Lawsuits mounted. Sponsors demanded restitution. The courts froze his assets, and creditors circled like vultures. His polished reputation shattered into ridicule. Journalists he'd once mocked now used his story as a cautionary tale in lectures about corruption and arrogance. He'd wanted to be remembered as the savior of modern journalism. Now he was remembered as its cautionary fraud. And me? For the first time in years, I felt whole. The same people who had doubted me now called me courageous, resilient, unstoppable. My inbox overflowed with invitations to speak, to teach, to write again. Priya insisted I take a permanent column under my own name. Leah joined me as an editor. Marcus, shaken but earnest, asked if he could learn the real way from me. It wasn't about rebuilding what Victor stole anymore. It was about building something stronger. I poured myself into launching an independent platform dedicated to the very principle Victor tried to sell: voices unfiltered, truth untamed, stories immune to the claws of greed. We called it The Echo, because truth, once spoken, always finds a way to resonate. Late one night, I stood in the old press room, the same place where my silence had ended and my voice had returned. I thought about Victor, the smirk, the arrogance, the way he once called me incompetent, unreliable. I smiled, not out of spite, but with the sharp satisfaction of justice served. Because in the end, he hadn't silenced me. He'd amplified me. He became the proof of my integrity, the evidence of my resilience, the stage for my voice. And as his legacy crumbled to dust, mine was just beginning to rise. That's poetic justice, isn't it? The man who tried to erase my name ensured it would be remembered forever. Now, let me ask you, have you ever been betrayed by someone who tried to silence your voice, to bury your worth, to make you feel small? How did you fight back? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this tale gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because I promise you, there are more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice that will leave you breathless. Remember this: sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just survival, it's becoming the voice they can never escape.